Hello everybody and welcome to part 4 of this Spoon Graphics Making Things Glow in Photoshop breakdown. And we're picking up here, looking at the painted glow layer that I've created, the ambient glow that we have here. And I wanted to bring up a couple of things. Just looking at the other video, I realized that Chris from Spoon Graphics was using a paintbrush size of like 1100, and we ended up using a paintbrush size of about 800. We're working on the same exact file, and so what's the result? The result is that our glow that we've just created is a little small. Instead of just deleting it and going back and changing the size and doing it the same way so we get the same effect, it occurred to me that we might be able to talk a little bit about one of the things that I will very often do in Photoshop is use the free transform tool to modify something, almost anything. So let's jump into that, and then we'll continue following the Spoon Graphics video. So let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit. Command Option 0 will look at the photo at 100%. And let's go ahead and over here into our layers palette now. I could go down and hit the eyeball down here on the background layer, and then the color lookup, and then the antlers, and then the antlers, and so on. You can manually select each eyeball so that you're left with only the painted glow layer. Now, this is actually not that helpful, I'm realizing, because what's left is this checkerboard indicator of transparency. So let's actually turn all these layers back on. By just going down and clicking on each one. Now there is a shortcut key. I'm going to skip over it for now just to move on. What we want to do though is here with the painted glow, let's go ahead and just run up and see what free transform does. So edit, free transform, you can see the shortcut key is Command T. What happens is that it puts a bounding box around the area that you have the thing. In this case, it's the two paintbrush kind of circles that we created over the antlers. Normally you need to make a selection before you do the free transform, but because I know that on this layer we only have those two paintbrush swatches, we should be able to transform just that by hitting Command T. So you can transform this if you want, and in this case I think just elongating it so it actually matches more of the shape. It's more of an oval shape perhaps than a circle shape. I think that might actually look a little bit better than using a bigger circular brush anyway. So you can transform it. Now I just wanted to indicate that there are several different updates. We're using Photoshop CC 2018 for this video here. On the latest version of Photoshop, they actually changed the way that the free transform works in terms of the way that it distorts or skews something. The newer version of Photoshop will do its best to try not to skew or transform something so that it looks really different. In this case, we don't care about skewing it. We want to elongate it a little bit. So let's go ahead and just grab from the bottom here, and we can see that we can sort of extend that and then move it so that those glows are sort of centered around each antler. But the thing that I wanted to point out, I'm going to hit Command minus just to kind of get a better view here and more space to drag up. The thing that I wanted to point out was, yeah, I think that's actually probably pretty good in terms of where those brushes are located. But with the latest version of Photoshop, you may have to hold the Shift key down. If you're grabbing from the corner or from the top even, you may actually have to hold a shortcut key to modify it. It used to be that you hold the Shift key and that would constrain the proportions of your transformation. Now it's the other way around. The default is to constrain the proportions of your transformation, and you have to hold the Shift key to skew or stretch something. So just an FYI, depending on the version of Photoshop that you're using, you may need to hold the Shift key down in order to get the effect that you're looking for. So I actually like this solution better than using the circular brush to begin with. And so once you're done with the transformation here, we're going to go ahead and either click the check mark up here at the top of the screen, commit transformation. You could hit the return key, the enter key. There's a couple of ways to do it. So we're ready to change the blending mode of this painted glow layer. So let's do that. The blending mode that we want to change from here on the painted glow is soft light. So let's go down here to soft light. And that will give us the glow that we're looking for. All right. You can modify over here using the opacity. So if in Photoshop, there's a couple of ways. Often when you have a slider, you can actually click on the word itself, and then you can drag down and you can modify the layer opacity. You could click this little down arrow and drag along this bar too. It does the same thing. You can also select it and then type in, let's say you know you want to be at 40%. You could do something like that. You can any combination of that. Often when I'm doing something on a slider, I'll go to the kind of overdo it at 100%, I'll underdo it at 0%, and then I'll just find that sweet spot in the middle. In this case, I don't think 100% looks terrible, but let's back that off just a little bit. 40%, not quite doing it, 0%. Now I'm seeing like 100% actually looks like a little bit too much compared to that 0%. So yeah, maybe somewhere in the middle here. I think actually somewhere around 60 is kind of what I'm seeing. I think Chris arrived at 40%, 39% on the video. So it's going to be a visual thing. What looks good to you? And that's why I overdo it and underdo it. When I'm trying to figure out what looks good, I'll go too far and then I'll back off and then I find that sweet spot in the middle. The next step is to actually group these layers together. Now I'm going to go ahead and modify what I am seeing here by closing those, and then my layer palette gets much bigger and I can see a lot more, which is helpful for me. You can also actually change how big each layer is by going here into the layer palette, and you can go into the panel options at the bottom here, and you can change the thumbnail size. So I think I had large. If I go here, it gets a little smaller, a little bit more manageable, and I can see more layers this way. So you may want to do that as well. Now, I'm going to use a shortcut key, just as Chris does in the video, and we're going to go ahead and select the top layer, the painted glow layer, and go all the way down to the antler layer here at the bottom. I'm going to hold the shift key and I'm going to click on the layer itself. If I click on the box, the layer image over here on the left, that's not going to work, but anywhere in the middle of the layer over here, if I hold the shift key down and I single click, it's going to select the range. Now this works on a Mac, a PC, this particular kind of thing. If you're trying to select multiple files in the Finder, in Bridge, whatever the case may be, if you click and then shift click on another file in an order, and it works here in the layers, it'll select the range, everything in between. So we've just selected multiple layers now by using the shift key. Click on the first one and then shift click on the last one and it'll select everything in between. We're going to go ahead and use the shortcut key Command G to make a new group. You could also actually go down here to the third icon from the right, Create New Group. Command G is the shortcut key. Let's go ahead and rename that Group 1 to Antler. And now it just organizes our layers a little bit. We can see here under the antlers group are all of those layers that we created. It makes it so it's a little bit neater. And then we can actually add adjustment layers, which is what we're about to do, to the antlers layer, antlers group, and all of the layers in the antlers group will be affected by that. You'll see what I mean in just a second. All right, let's modify the color of these antlers now. And what we want to do is actually match the color to the scene. And because we have this sort of blue nighttime scene, we're going to pick a color that matches. So with the antlers layer selected, if we go down here to the bottom of the layers palette and we add a new adjustment layer, hue saturation, we're going to do a couple of things. And the first thing that we're going to do is choose colorize. Now this is a particular way that the hue and saturation adjustment can work on your photo. And in this case, you'll see when we create a clipping mask. Okay, if we click right here, it says this adjustment affects all layers below. Click to clip to the layer. What that means is if we click this right here, it will only affect what's below it. And because we have a group, it's going to affect everything in the group. So all of that work that we did, layering those antlers on top of each other, adding the glow, adding the blur, all of that, now we can make an adjustment. It's only going to affect that group. So that's the advantage of working in a group. It's neat. We can see our more layers and stuff like that. Once we're kind of done with some adjustments, we can just kind of organize things. But here we can have the hue saturation layer only affect this group. So that could be really helpful. If you're working on something, you can clip it using this clipping mask here. The adjustment clips to the layer, click to affect all layers below. So you can actually jump back and forth between that. And then we're going to go ahead and choose a hue that matches some kind of turquoise. We want this sort of glow to happen. We don't want it to be exactly the color of the background. We want it to be a little bit different. Something in here, I think. Crank the saturation up. Oh, and then we can choose our color based on that full saturation too. We want that neon glowy light for this particular image. So I think that that's going to work pretty well. And then you can affect the lightness here if you want it to be a little lighter or a little darker. In this case, the lightness, one of the things that's going to happen is actually there becomes less color. If you crank the lightness all the way up, it actually just goes to white. You may want that effect at some point when you're doing this kind of thing. But in this case, what we want to do is we want to keep quite a bit of that color in there, right? If we turn the lightness way down, it's not quite right. It doesn't quite look. We're not getting that glow. Anything on a negative scale over here, anything to the minus is going to take some of that highlight away. And I think what we're trying to do here is actually brighten it up. We want some of that white. And it's okay to go on an image like this to go white without detail. Not a problem. Often when you're doing edits, you're trying to preserve detail. You don't want to lose detail in things. But when you have, what I've noticed when you're creating this sort of glowy effect, oftentimes overexposure heightens the effect of the glow. So find the thing that works for you here. Make sure you're clipping the layer adjustment to the group below. And I think I'm going to wrap this part 4 up here, and then I'll see you in part 5.